Welcome to Horace Goes Podcasting for gamers with Pong memories. I'm your co-host, Kieran Breer.
And I'm your co-host, John McNamara. Kieran, you sound different and mysterious. What's going on?
Nothing mysterious. I've just got a cold. So apologies if I sound a bit bunged up and unclear this episode. Well, maybe that'll be like usual. I don't know. I've not been well the past couple of days, but the show must go on and all that. And we've got another fantastic episode. And that's going to be right up your street, John, with South Yorkshire and graphic novels as well as games on the menu.
It certainly is. Our guest this episode grew up not far from where I did and has had a stellar career in the games industry working on the creative side of games. He is the third BAFTA winner we've had on Horace.
Starting straight from school, he worked on many titles, being involved with famous games like Peter Beardsley's International Football and persuading his boss to get the rights to Laser Squad. But he co-created the BAFTA-winning hit series MediEvil, which led to him becoming a creative director at Sony and having quite a following around the world.
He's also written graphic novels, which we'll talk about more later. There's going to be an awful lot of gothic horror in today's episode.
That's just your t-shirt, John. Welcome to our guest this episode, Jason Wilson.
Hi John, hi Kieran, great to be here and thanks for that stellar introduction.
Hi!
It's great to have you.
Well, okay, so our first question. So, Jason, if you were stranded on a desert island and weirdly still had power, a monitor, the internet and a computer and the ability to get games, what game would that be?
Oh, that's a really interesting question because, for those older guys, there's probably like a game, probably per decade, isn't there, that you would love to have as a time capsule. But I'd probably have to go, and some of my development friends kind of make fun of me because of this, because I have been hopelessly addicted for over a decade to the Elder Scrolls games. So I'm going to merge two games together because I feel like they're kind of like they're so similar. So I'm going to say Oblivion and Skyrim as just entertained me for however long the Oblivion came out in Skyrim, and I'm always going back to play more DLC and playing it on different formats. So definitely Oblivion and Skyrim because I still feel like there's more in that world for me to plunder and explore.
Have you tried the online version of those games?
No, I'm not really much of an online gamer. I probably was around the time of Counter-Strike and the first Call of Duty Modern Warfare, and a few other games. I was pretty good at them, but I just don't have. I don't know. I just like to go home now and play games by myself because I'm grumpy and I don't want to play with other people.
I know what you mean. I got to say, when I saw, online Skyrim came out, I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing. But one of the problems I felt was that when you played single player, you were the hero and you felt kind of special. But when you saw 35 people queuing up for the same quest to save the world, you thought, I don't know about this. And I must admit, I kind of lost faith. It went back to single player again. But I've been playing the remastered Oblivion, which is really good. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, I would love to play it. I mean, maybe we'll touch this, but I'm not really a PC gamer. I'm a console gamer, and I'm especially a Switch console gamer these days. I love indie games, and I love slobbing out on my sofa or being on a train playing some weird indie game. But yeah, I'd love to get my hands on the remastered Oblivion on PC. But I heard it was very badly optimized, so it's a little bit sort of chunky frame rates unless you've got a mega super powerhoused PC.
I play it on the Xbox. It seems okay, but I suspect there have been a few compromises with the frames per second, that kind of stuff. It's okay. But I got to say I'm thoroughly enjoying that. So good to see a fellow Oblivionite, if that's what we're called.
Oh yeah, we'll go with that definitely. I love moral choices in games, and those moments that I've definitely had with the Elder Scrolls games, I really deliberated over a choice. And again, the same with the Fallout games. They're just like some real key moral conundrum moments that I really get invested in as a player. So yeah, I love that kind of.
Cool. I promise, Kieran, we'll get on to the questions in a second. We'll finally make our way from Oblivion. I think there are also...
We are going into Oblivion here, yeah.
That's it. That's the next 4 hours Oblivion fest. I think what I found with the game too is that there are kind of real world moral choices about how you play the game, because there's so many kind of little tweaks you can do to glitch up your magic, and you can kind of they're not exactly, they're not cheat codes, but there are things you can do to ramp up your magic. And I didn't do it for about, I'll give myself a full, I don't know, 35 minutes before I thought, no, I'm going to give it a go. And now, of course, I've got a magic level of 500,000, a stamina of 3, and strength of 5.
Yeah.
Which makes for a really interesting dynamic in the game. But yeah, no, I got to say, I kind of get lost in those games very, very easily. And you look at the game, you turn it on, and you look up, and 5 hours have gone by, and you wonder what's happened to your life.
Oh, they're like going on holiday. I just feel it's like I can go to those worlds and feel like I am on a holiday in the Alps or somewhere, or whatever it might be, and it seeps into my real world as well, because I used to go on holiday a lot. One of my hobbies is hiking and trekking, especially in the sort of German, Austrian Alps. Right. And obviously Skyrim takes a lot of influences from that region of the world. So when I'm out there, I'm constantly saying to whoever's with me, this is just like Skyrim. This is just like Oblivion. I think there might be a dungeon just in those trees over there, or whatever, something Skyrim related.
And you could surprise fellow hikers by just literally attacking them out of the blue.
Exactly. Stealing their clothes.
Exactly.
I was confused just for a moment. Yeah. Well, the next question might touch on the point you made at the beginning of the last one. That is it could be a game from every decade, but from your very earliest, maybe, decade of gaming, what is your first gaming memory?
Well, I mean, nobody can see us because this is a podcast, so I'm probably going to sound absolutely ancient. So you're probably picturing some, sort of maybe some kind of wizard with a big white beard, old and decrepit. So obviously the first game I ever remember probably was literally Pong. Yeah. But I don't look like that, dear listener.
Not at all.
I was very, 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 very young when I got into the gaming industry, as John and Kieran said, straight from school at the age of 16. But yeah, my first memory is Pong. But I'm kind of going to discount that as a real pertinent memory, because the one game that got its hooks into me, apart from Manic Miner, but the one game that really kind of got its hooks into me and showed me what games could be in terms of like imaginary worlds that felt believable was the Lords of Midnight. So I'm going to choose that one. I'm going to cheat, because obviously I can go back to Space Invaders, Galaxians, Pong, but the Lords of Midnight was probably the game that made me want to be a games developer.
The number of times that comes up so far with people is very high.
The name Morkin has never left. I can't remember my children's names half the time, but I do remember Morkin, the chap I played in Lords of Midnight. It was such
and Luxor.
Luxor, yes.
Rothron the Wise.
Yeah.
Yes.
I should have named my children those characters.
You should have done.
And then I could have killed two birds with one stone. Thankfully, my children.
There must be people that do that. Call out to the listeners. Have you named your children after any favourite game characters?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Maybe pets. It's more likely to happen with pets than children, but you never know.
Oh yeah,
you never know.
We support this movement to do exactly that. Wow. So of course Manic Miner. That was a kind of my first step into kind of like a real computer game world where you explored things and tried to do stuff. But when I listen to kids today, I sound like my granddad. When you listen to kids today about how hard games are, they know nothing until they've played Manic Miner. And literally, you had to be pixel perfect on those jumps. They were insane, absolutely insane. But I love.
And there was no save positions, there was no checkpoints. You were back to the beginning if you lost all your lives.
That's right. And of course, Jet Set Willy that came along straight after. That was an absolutely phenomenal game as well. Blimey.
Bugs and all.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Was Jet Set Willy the one that you couldn't actually finish because there was a bug that meant you couldn't complete the final?
What a
Absolutely.
winner. Yeah. I bet that was frustrating.
And a childhood memory that all gamers of a certain age will remember is those who pirated Jet Set Willy sat there and borrowed their friends the little kind of like remember the little cheat code thing that you had to enter those colours into the lens lock, which you put over your screen, and you with coloured marker pens you could copy down all the little placement of the coloured lines from the card you got with the cassette, and so you would have to do that in order to pirate it and play it at home. Crazy times.
Sweet days. Great times. Oh, it's me. Sorry, I forgot. I was so busy talking about the previous question. So, what are you playing at the moment, and what are you most looking forward to?
The last game I literally played last week was Exit 8.
Oh.
Very, very...
new to us, looking at our faces.
Sold millions, big hit. It's a very, very small indie game. I think it was only like one or two people, a tiny little Japanese development team, maybe a solo developer, I'm not too sure. And it's a game set on the Tokyo Underground, the sort of metro, and you're just dropped into this metro underground corridor, and it just loops around like a quick loop, and you walk around and go, what the hell am I doing here? How did I get here? And then a sign on the wall says, basically, if you find an anomaly in the corridor, the next corridor, something's wrong and you have to turn back. And you quickly learn that it becomes like a spot the difference game in this one corridor with all these different underground posters, advertising various things you might see in the London Underground. But weird stuff happens from really subtle anomalies that are not the same when you go around this looping corridor. It changes every time. And so you have to run away from the anomalies, and then you can go to the next level of the repetition loop. Now, it sounds really odd and bizarre, and it actually does work, and it becomes increasingly creepier and creepier the more the anomalies start coming into play. But this sparked a whole subgenre of games, like Spot the Difference games. And there's a whole mini-genre of these games sparked by the incredible success of Exit 8. And Exit 8 was recently made into a movie in Japan, and it's playing the festival circuit around the world at the moment to rave audience reviews. So, cool. Amazing. Yeah, these little tiny games that not many people play, but are giant hits in their own sort of niche, pretty much youth market that likes that kind of quirky, sort of creepy pasta type games.
Huh. Is it generally available, the film? Is it something that one can get on
Not yet, no.
Netflix?
It was released in Japan last year, and it's just starting to do the festival circuit now.
Right.
So I don't know when it will be widely released on streaming or anywhere like that. But it's up and coming. You can watch the trailer on YouTube.
Oh, well, there you go.
And the film looks exactly like the game. It's uncanny. It's crazy.
It's a great thing about the games industry that you can get a niche that still gets several million sales or plays or whatever, is depending on the kind of game, and that's great to promote. Breadth, variety, all kinds of different engagement styles and stories and everything.
It's amazing, isn't it? Because it shows that a tiny little development team can latch onto a simple idea of basically taking in, what a Spot the Difference idea, and turning it into a little tiny game, which really kind of makes you a bit scared playing it, and you've got to use all your little sort of mental observation skills to solve this game, and becomes a giant hit. And meanwhile, this is going to sound a little bit, I guess, topical, but whilst the AAA industry is collapsing under its own weight of giant budgets and enormous teams, and yet you get these little which kind of remind me of the old days of where we talk about the Spectrum and the Amiga, is those small development teams making really cool ideas at a low risk and low cost, but pay huge rewards. And I'd like to see the industry going in that direction, if we want to get into that topic later.
Yeah.
We need more Jeff Minters, don't we?
Yeah, oh, wow. We definitely do.
Need more Mutant Camel or Mutant Llama themed games.
So yeah, the other half of that question is, what are you most looking forward to? Is it one of those indie type games that you know is coming up, or something else?
I heard that. I think there's a rumor going around that there's a new Fallout game in development.
I thought you were going to say there's a rumor going around about a new GTA game or something like that.
Oh, you are, yeah. I mean, of course, there's going to be a new Elder Scrolls or a new Fallout game. Because that's an interesting question. I generally don't look forward to new things, because new things come along and take me by surprise, like Exit 8, for example.
The good things, yeah.
Yeah, I just don't know they're coming, and then suddenly I get wind on on the social networks that there's this cool little quirky game, and it's more like I'm looking for those kind of concepts and ideas than I'm waiting for another Grand Theft Auto, which I'm looking forward to, a new GTA, but I don't know what more you can do with that concept. But I'll definitely, when it comes out, I'll certainly want to play it.
What games have you wanted to play in the past, but you didn't have a chance to? Maybe you didn't have the device that you needed, or
PC games, like I mentioned earlier. I'm not a PC gamer, but there are lots of games that run really well on a PC that some of my friends play that I haven't played. I mean, I'd love to play the remaster of Oblivion that was mentioned earlier, that came out last month or the month before. I really wanted to play the recent remaster of Silent Hill 2, which is one of my favourite games.
Oh, Silent Hill.
Yeah, so I wanted to see how they'd remastered that, because I heard they made a few changes, and I'd like to see a next generation visual interpretation of an old PS2 game. Cyberpunk I've not played yet. Be quite interested in that. Yeah, that's a biggie, but that's a huge time sink, and I just don't get the time I used to have. Despite constantly playing Oblivion and Skyrim.
I think what got me about Silent Hill was it was the way that it started off creepy, but without any kind of jagged, jerky experiences. It just got slowly more and more and more darker, more creepy, until it bore no resemblance to how it began. And it sucked me completely into that world. I thought it was an amazing game.
Well, the second one especially is a game that I think was one of the earliest game examples I could think of, where again it really made you think about your morals and your perception of what was going on, because all the nightmarish stuff made sense in the context of this character you think you're searching for your wife in the game in this town, and all the Pyramid Head stuff all had relation to the past, because you learn as the player playing this guy that he wasn't especially the best husband in the world, and his wife had died of some illness in hospital, and this is his kind of guilt and nightmare, and all the nurses and the weird stuff is all manifested by his wife being in hospital suffering from this illness, and him sort of leaving her, and you learn this as a player, and by the end of it you're like, wow, my perception of this entire world and the character I've been playing has been upended by this moral story. And it was a really adult storyline that you would normally get in films. And that was one of the earliest games. I think that it wasn't just nightmarish for nightmare's sake. It all tied into the whole thematic theme of this moral situation that
not
you
just
were
a bunch
playing
of jump cuts.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the future games, the future games had Pyramid Head and all the iconic tropes, but they no longer made any sense in terms of the context of that second game. They just became, just tropes to throw around. But yeah, Silent Hill 2, fantastic. So I'd like to see, what they did with the remake of that in terms of visuals.
Yeah, me too. So, Jason, you are fortunate enough to hail from what is widely accepted to be the cradle of Western civilization, which, of course, is Doncaster.
Donny.
So congratulations on that achievement alone. Well done.
I know. Yeah, when I found out you were from Doncaster, that just blew my mind, to be honest, John, because I don't meet, apart from my old friends, I don't come across many podcasters from Doncaster. So
no, it's like that big white ball. We escaped it. So we managed to get away and come back of our own free will. But can you tell me, probably for my own nostalgia's sake, what are your kind of as growing up in Donny? I guess we're, if I'm not insulting you too much, a similar-ish kind of age. What were your kind of experience of Donny? What were your favourite place to go? And what was it about Donny that inspired you in the direction that you took in your career?
Well, massively, I'd probably say. It's always there in the background. I did a French magazine called Sick did an article on my sort of games and graphic novels that I'd worked on over the years. And he said to me in his French accent, he said, Jason, I see there is a through line in your work. You may not have noticed it, but in lots of your games you've worked on, you add all these things about mining and industrial things. Even that cowboy western game you made in the 1990s, Silverlode, it is about a cursed mine, and in MediEvil, dans la Fortescue, he falls underneath. I don't know what accent I'm doing here. That's French, in case you didn't.
Very good. Très bien.
And in MediEvil, you fall under the ground and end up in this industrial world of machines and things. And in your latest book, Coalface, it is about. So he'd noticed I keep peppering these things in, and it is because of my family's background in mining and steelworks and all the blue collar sort of jobs that generations before me did, and growing up in Donny in the 70s and 80s around coalfields and quarries, and all the members of my family in Glasgow working on the trains and steel mills.
Big locomotive, yeah.
And one of my earliest memories as a tiny little child, I don't remember the actual event necessarily, but I remember the aftermath, was we lived in a tiny village very near to Flixborough. And Flixborough was until recently, one of the biggest post-war explosions and industrial disasters. And it was a great big chemical works near Hull that exploded on a weekend. And luckily it was a weekend, so it wasn't a weekday. Yeah. So a lot of the men in the operation centre, one of the reactors went critical. It's a bit like a mini Chernobyl, but obviously without the nuclear element. Sort of terribly, but incredibly grateful it wasn't worse than it was, even though it was terrible, manned their station to try to get the reactor back under control and couldn't, and it exploded, killing all of them, but wiping out a nearby village, and it was an enormous. And then my family driving past it months later, and as a tiny little child, I was probably 3 or 4 maybe at the time, seeing this wreckage of this village and seeing pots and pans and sofas and mattresses just lying in the road and not being able to compute it. And my brain sort of computed it as some giant terrible monster had been through the air and like Godzilla and trashed it all. So that really kind of stuck with me. And then growing up in the 80s, John, I'm sure you remember this, obviously the miners' strike and all of that. My dad was a coal miner. And that lasted for over a year, if anyone wasn't familiar with this. It was an industrial dispute, strike. It lasted for over a year, and it was deemed an illegal strike, so the miners couldn't get any payouts or government help to go on strike. So they had to find other ways to feed their families, which meant a lot of the women, the wives, mums, going to work, and in this weird way, this terrible state that the men found themselves in, almost like inadvertently freed up what was then the gender role of the wife staying at home to do the housework and look after the kids, and they were the ones who went out to get work. So it was this great political melting pot of change in the north and England in many ways. I mean, it's a huge topic. We're not going to cover all of it, but all that stuff had a big influence on me as a kid because I wanted an escape. What I saw was a sinking ship, because my future was, my dad wanted me to be a blue-collar worker, and follow in the family footsteps, and I did not want to because I got hold of a Spectrum, and the Spectrum was a magical portal into a whole new universe of a digital escape. there was a new industrial revolution coming, which my parents just could not understand. And I have this memory of my dad, this big working class guy, tattoos, big callous hands, having a go at my Spectrum and his big chunky fingers trying to touch those little rubber keys. And it was like watching... Yeah. It was like, it sounds awful, doesn't it? It was a bit like those monkeys in 2001 when the monolith appears. It's like, what is this thing? Oh my God. But it's just like, it was just, as a kid, we were a product of the Spectrum in many ways, or today's kids would be, products of, smartphones and stuff. But then it was the Spectrum, and that was basically a portal to my escape from what was going on at the time, and forever grateful.
Yeah, our kids look at us and go, they've got really inflexible thumbs. They can't use touch screens with the same speed, and we're kind of going.
Exactly. They look at us like I looked at my dad. Oh my God! Yes, we've gone full circle.
Yes, it happens to every generation.
I know from around that time in '85, which that took place, was a real pivotal point. I think for a lot of people, where I think growing up as a kid, going to school, you held a number of assumptions about life in general, the government, what their function was, what they were there to do, as well as the arms that govern. And then after that, you begin to think, hang on a minute, this isn't aligned with what I've been taught. And I think a lot of people, I think a lot of people who may well go into creative industries with something meaningful to say have come through those pivotal moments, those kind of revelations, and gone, hang on a minute, this isn't what we've been brought up or told to believe is true. And I think a lot of the passion and drive to do that comes from trying to express that there's something else there. It's not always the narrative that we should all follow or we've been given to follow. Do you have a favourite memory of Doncaster?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
No.
No,
there are positive memories of Doncaster. There was a market stall, a bookstall.
Oh.
I think there was only two. Because for a long time, Doncaster never even had a bookshop. Just like Dubé Smith's was it. But on the market, there was a very long bookstore, second-hand bookstore. And it had novels, lots of pulp novels, and some American comics and American magazines. And that, like the Spectrum, that was my portal into creativity as well. Because with my pocket money, I'd buy things like Starlog, and Fangoria and American comics, and I was a massive fan of 2000 as well. But these were more exotic because they were like American and a bit more glossy.
Yeah.
And reading those, seeing all the behind the scenes stuff on films, kind of taught me that people made things. I mean, people had a job where they made paintings for films or weird monsters and stuff. So that was my church in Cambridge, Doncaster. Sorry, was that bookstall was amazing, and 2000 AD was obviously instrumental. And I know you're a huge fan, John, because you mentioned in the preamble, and I'm sure maybe you were the same. I don't know, but I'm sure lots of people who had creative ambition, you would copy, drawings from 2000 AD.
Yeah,
that was your art school.
Oh my God, I have a vase. Which was never meant to be a Judge Dredd pastiche, and now that sits in our kitchen. So I still do it now. Oh my gosh! I think Pat Mills probably would appeal to literally every teenager in the 1980s in Doncaster. I think without a doubt. And so today, when you go back, do you have a favourite spot, or how do you feel the town's developed?
I've still got friends and family in Doncaster, so I do go back a couple of times a year. I mean, when you leave somewhere and you go back to that place, you notice the change more than the people who have been there all the time. And my friends maybe have seen the change slower than I see it, because I see it in big jumps. Obviously, it's a shadow of its former self, like most town and city centres are. But obviously, northern working class industrial towns are much harder hit than, say, I'm sure Cambridge weathers and Oxford, places like that, weather these storms better because they have big universities and tourism. Whereas places like Doncaster or Leeds or whatever, they fall harder. So it is sometimes, on a serious note, painful for me going back sometimes.
Yeah. Because
it feels, for me, like a place of ghosts a little bit. It's such a large town centre, and it's the same with lots of town centres, but Doncaster's very large. Like, what do you do with all of that real estate? And there's some amazing, beautiful buildings there that are, empty, awesome looking bits of architecture. But what do you do with all that space? You can't have a mobile phone shop and a vape shop on every, street corner. And it's so expensive, isn't it, to regenerate that space? Do you demolish it, but then what do you do, turn it into more flats? Then why do all these extra people want to live in an area? So it is. It's like a bit of a. Some bits of it are amazing though. Like, John, for example, it used to be the textiles market, which I used to love going around as a kid, seeing all those big rolls of textiles. And there used to be this amazing old school market pet shop that had you could buy anything there. It was probably all dodgy. Tortoises, heaps of tortoises, and dogs and cats.
Tortoise every week.
Yeah, exactly. That's been turned into some really cool sort of like eatery music sort of markets.
Yeah, the Wool
and the
Market,
Corn Exchange.
Yeah.
The Corn Exchange is really nice now. It's like an arts and crafts centre. So it's good to see bits of it regenerated, but to regenerate all that, in the theatre's a great addition as well. That's really good.
Yeah.
The cast, as you'd say.
The cast. Absolutely. Well, I'm going back up there again this weekend, so I'll check it out. But I've not been to the new Corn, not the new Corn Exchange, but the regenerated Corn Exchange. So I want to give that a go. So I remember going there with my mum when I was about like 5 or 6. I've got all memories of it, but I'll have a little explore. So that, I'm sure everyone will be delighted to know that I finished up editing now about Doncaster.
Call Time and Donny.
Oh yes, but I'll be at those weekends to have a little look around. Oh, but the Gormont's gone, Jason. The Gormont's gone.
No!
I was there
Finally.
and suddenly it was gone. I was like, why is it gone? It's now a car park.
The Gormont. Yeah, I saw so many pivotal films in the Gormonts. Yeah, that was my film education. The video shop in local video shop in Dunsville.
Oh yeah.
And Ted's Videos, it was called, and the Gorman Cinema, obviously, was. They were two pivotal places in my education.
I went to that same video store in Dunsville many, many times.
Oh, did you? Oh,
yeah,
right. Wow.
Pretty large. Yeah.
I remember. Do you remember during again something younger listeners, all these archaic times in history? There was the video nasties. Years where it was actually illegal to watch things like Dawn of the Dead, believe it or not, or various horror films which seem very tame now. But from Ted's Video Shop, when they were getting rid of all their videos before the police came and nicked them all, they sold me their copy of Dawn of the Dead. So I have Ted's Video Shop's VHS copy of Dawn of the Dead still in my house.
Oh, fine. Keep it, sir. Keep it. It'll be worth. Yes. It'll be.
Does it make strange noises when it plays?
Yeah, if it still plays.
Very stretched. Cool. Yeah, let's call Time and Donny.
Oh yeah.
But obviously that's where your career started, and you've had a fascinating and very varied one, as we've said, starting from school into the games industry, working in many different pieces of IP in and around games. You've designed a BAFTA award-winning game, worked with comic art geniuses, and got to be a creative director at Sony. And from all of that variety, if you possibly can, what would be your proudest achievement?
Does it sound trite to say that the proudest achievement is actually being able to make things and all the wonderful friends I've made along the way? Now, I know that sounds like a lot of hippie nonsense, but honestly, genuinely, coming from humble beginnings and not going to university, being self-taught, and being, you know, kind of poorish at the time, you know, and, you know, charity food during the miners' strike, and then getting to, you know, work with amazing people that are way more qualified than you, that have got university degrees coming out of every orifice, and then even working with people and getting, you know, inviting like Pat Mills over to you know, consult on ideas, and becoming, you know, very friendly, and him helping me out, and other kind of, I don't want to name them, but big name writers and film people and comic artists who I absolutely, you know, think they're amazing, you know, supporting me and you know, helping me, is, you know, that still to this day humbles me and blows my mind, that, you know, that I work in and operate, could operate in that world.
Yeah.
And then when people tell me, especially younger people, tell me that stuff I've made, you know, was so inspirational to them, and they're so, you know, yeah, and they're inspired in the same way that Pat Mills or whoever inspired me, that the same thing, and they sign, you know, they ask me to sign things, or they give me their games and they've written on the box, you know, if it wasn't for you and blah blah blah, I wouldn't be here. And that is amazing. And you get to a certain point in your life where, you know, you don't want to be you know, you go, oh, I've done some stuff I'm really proud of, and I'm really happy, and you kind of like want to hand that back down to people, and you kind of like want to, like, you know, teach them more, and yeah. So I think just, you know, just overall surviving through the ups and downs, and just working with amazing people is honestly genuine. I know I'm not singling out a single title here, but that's the thing.
Journey.
Yeah,
the journey can be the oh, what was the phrase? Because I was thinking of it earlier. But yeah, the journey can be the meaning of the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although for me, the fact that you can have tea with Pat Mills, it just boggles the mind. That is an achievement in itself. That means, I think, in my mind, you've made it, sir.
I remember, John, a meeting with Pat, and I was the creative director at the time, and at the time I was working on a science fiction game for Sony that never got released, because you inevitably end up spending years of your career working on things that don't get released, and then you have these big gaps in your portfolio that you're not allowed to talk about still because they're under NDA. So people go, what did you do between the years of, you know, 2008 2010? And you go, well, I was in development hell, I'm afraid. And I can't show you anything, because to this day the Sony lawyers will, you know, come down on you even for things from decades ago.
Peer out of bushes.
But anyway, I was working in a science fiction game, and I got Pat to come in because I wanted him to be the script consultant, and he came over to the studio with Clint Langley.
Oh my god!
And Pat's agent, who was both their agents at the time, and we were having this meeting, and I was introducing him to this game concept idea. And Pat is a very humble person, and in this meeting, and I had all my other team members who were junior than me in the meeting room, and they didn't really know who Pat Mills was, but I did. I was fanboying, but I had to be professional. And so I was sitting there in the meeting and, you know, talking through all the stuff we were doing, and Pat went, oh, I'm not sure, I don't know if you know this or not, but you know, many years ago I did this thing called Flesh, and you know, and inside I'm thinking, of course, can I swear?
Oh my god!
Yeah. Of course, I flipping no Flesh. Of course, but I said yes, I'm aware of Flesh. Yes.
Yeah, I model myself on Carver. That was my role model in life. Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah, so, and then I would go to I would go to comic events when I was a creative director and I could hire people. I would go to things like San Diego Comic Con and Angoulême, another big comic festival in France, and all the comic festivals in the UK. And I wanted to staff my games up with comic creators, because the one thing that I would say the games industry is not very good at is, to a certain extent, it's quite insular in its outlook at other creative industries. Because I remember when I left games for a while to do graphic novels, which, you know, I had to learn a lot more about script writing and writing and editorial and working with people like Titan, and illustrating very big graphic novels, and you're the sole designer of all the characters, the creatures, the environments, everything, and the storyboarding. And then when I came back to games, and one of the big questions from a lot of studio heads or recruiters was, so why did you leave games?
Yeah.
And I thought that was...
like there isn't another world out there.
Yeah, and I thought, well, I kind of stepped aside from games for a while to learn another creative skill, which uses all the skills, if not more so, than when you're in a team, and you're the only person apart from your editors creating all this world. But it taught me that games can be very suspicious of creators outside of games. I mean, occasionally you get scriptwriters coming in and actors and so forth, but it can be quite insular and inward looking. So I wanted to bring in people from different industries because I thought, these comic artists, they're amazing. They're basically the entire studio of game concept artists working on one strip, and they're doing everything. And I think game studios just don't realise how amazingly talented and industrious a lot of people in the comic industry are. Yeah. And so, I'm going to name some names out because it's, a lovely guy. People like Chris Weston, and a number of other names. And we always wanted to work on something together, but it never quite happened. So I wanted to bring in all these different people from different industries to work on games with me at Sony. So that was a brilliant opportunity to get my joy and love of other things into the games I was making.
Can you, if you can say, who is your favourite 2000 AD artist?
Without a doubt, Kevin O'Neill.
Oh, yeah.
Without a doubt. I mean, I love Mike McMahon and I love a lot of the new guys, but Kevin O'Neill, there's no one quite like him.
No.
His early Nemesis, absolute. I mean, I've probably bought Nemesis in every edition going.
It was the detail that he would put on the edges of what when you see those kind of like those big kind of Bibles and on the edges, and they've got the very ornate work, and he would do that on his artwork. He would have this kind of really ornate. There's a word for it that escapes me. These
like illuminations.
Yes.
Medieval illuminations. Yeah, which is perfect for Nemesis the Warlock because it had that kind of medieval Spanish Inquisition vibe to it, didn't it?
Is there, from all that, is there a pivotal moment, a sliding doors moment in your career that you would have handled in a different way?
One thing that still holds me back to this day is stepping out of games to do comics and graphic novels, which I love as much as I do games, and learning a whole new craft in a different, an adjacent sort of creative field to games, because they both share similarities. And as I mentioned earlier, kind of going back into games, recruiters and those doing the interviews in studios were very suspicious. And then when they look at the comic book stuff that I'd done, even though I'd shipped and produced and directed and designed amazing, huge, massive selling games that have a loyal fan base, somehow they were like, why is this concept art, Jason? Why is this art direction, this comic book? And I was just think, but it's the entire world designed by one or two people. It's like, I don't understand the concern. Do you think you can still? Do you think you could still do a game? It's like, I think I could. Yes.
It's a coherent world that's created here and drawn out and everything.
And I would think to myself, like, if you're in a team, which is brilliant, and it's all about the team, and the team, has to fire on all cylinders, but you can hide within the team. People can hide in a team.
Yeah.
And you have your little thing you're looking after. But when you're doing like all my favorite comic artists and writers, you cannot hide. You're naked. Everything you do is there to be seen, warts and all, and you're carrying a lot of responsibilities in terms of everything that goes into making those worlds. So that oddly was, I wouldn't say I regret anything or I would do anything differently. But it's certainly been an interesting experience going from one industry and then back to another industry and the reception you get when you go back. Because that question of why did you leave was like, whoa, it's like the Prisoner, the TV show. Why did you resign? Dun, 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 dun. It's like there was no great scandal or weird whatever it was. It just I just passionately love creativity, and I passionately love the world of comics and film and games, and in my mind they're all in the same sphere of creativity, and I think they're like a beautiful mix of all those sort of art forms. Games has the interactive element which films and comics don't have. Comics can have that where you can slow down and speed time up depending on how you read and move your eyes across the comic pages, and there's a whole skill to that where you turn the page and it becomes a movie in its own right. And films are amazing because they've got cinematography and acting, so they're all they all merge together in my mind. So yeah, I don't know if I would, to answer your question. It's maybe I wouldn't have stayed as long as I did do in comics and books. But I think I only grew as a creative. But it was an interesting situation. The kind of this, and it taught me that some of the people in the games industry are suspicious of people outside of the industry. It's very, very odd. Very odd.
I guess with that in mind, are there any trends that you see in gaming or the industry that concern you?
Oh, how long have you got?
Oh, wow.
As I said earlier, I think the rise once again, and I guess this has been happening for probably the past decade, but the rise again in small indie developments that can take risks and do really experimental games. I mean, there were just so many you could mention, from Papers, Please to Dredge, to probably many games I'm forgetting. Dave the Diver, things like that, which is kind of the Scuba Diver on the spectrum, isn't it? But with sushi, if you've played Dave the Diver. So all those games, and a lot of those games are abstract. And what I loved about the early 8-bit days was games are abstract, but you read into them. And I love that indie games can still be very abstract and you project into them.
Right.
Like, Untitled Swan Game and things like that. Or even Minecraft way back, if you want to go quite far back, was very abstract and was a huge hit and was a kind of like a very low budget game that can run on any PC. And obviously just is still a massive thing to this day. So I don't know if it's a recent trend, but I love that. I think that I look at the game industry a little bit from a slight distance, working in an adjacent sort of field nowadays, with horror that my beloved industry is collapsing all over the place. And that's a mixture of things. It's a mixture of the cost of living. It's a mixture of a lot of investment came into the games and film and streaming industry during COVID. And then we came out of COVID and Kel Supri, people don't want to stay at home anymore playing games on the sofa, being furloughed. And then the Ukraine war happened, and then the fuel crisis and the energy crisis and all these crises. And investors start pulling their money out of things like streaming and games, and streaming now has to go to an advert-based model where you pay money now to subscribe more to get rid of adverts because they realise that model is unsustainable. The giant budgeted games that have hundreds and hundreds of people working on them, that take 4 to 6 years to make, are unsustainable apart from a couple of giant hitters. And I think it's a disastrous way to see a creative field go, because what kept things like traditional TV going for as long as it did do, even comics, I know people don't read as many comics to do, but they're still small budgeted things that lead on to bigger things. The gaming industry was made up of small games. I remember back in the day, you could work on 2-3 games a year, and if one of those games wasn't a hit, you had another one coming down the pipeline, which your team would go onto, and your team would be quite small, which is, again, the indie model now, but it was then. But we've gone to this bigger than Hollywood model, and And now with the advent of AI as well, creeping into code and scripting and concept art, and universities just churning out an endless flood of students. It's everyone's scrambling for the jobs, and it's just a terrible. I'm positive and I'm hopeful because I think good games will still be made, and of course they will. But I think it's like an incredible crisis that's going on at the moment, and it just makes me very sad.
With that in mind, do you think you could create MediEvil in the current world? Or if you were to do it now, how might you do it differently in order to get commissioned or get a contract funding to do it?
Well, a lot of things in life are a product of their time and place. Sony used to have this motto of, their motto used to be in development was first or best. First meaning you're the first person to do a style of thing or whatever, or best meaning you're going to do that thing but beat everybody else, and obviously everyone wants to do that. And at the time, MediEvil was a sort of quirky, Tim Burton-y German expressionism, funny, kooky horror game. I mean, there were some kooky horror games, but it was the one that did it probably the most colourful and imaginative way, maybe. And it kind of touched a lot of people. The main character, the gangly character, looking for redemption. So he had a redemption arc. And even though Sedan was this cowardly guy in real life before he died, and this legend has sprung up about him being the hero, in reality he wasn't, he was the coward. And this curse brings the dead back to life. And the other dead characters mock him because they know his secrets. And so he's trying to redeem himself. But by redeeming himself, he then has to die again. So it had this bittersweet ending. And that really resonated with fans. But the question, could you do it today, is impossible to answer because it was the right thing at the right time. But I still get people approaching me. I can't say who they were, but a very well-known TV production house that have made very big TV shows that everybody's seen approached to me and said, because I was looking for work a couple of years ago, because this is very serious, dear listener, but I was going through a divorce and money was tight, and I online I said, I'm looking for work, anyone can help me get a job, blah blah blah, because I was a self-employed freelancer doing books, and suddenly when you go for a divorce, you need money to go through a divorce. That's all I'll say. And so I put this out into the world, and then I was contacted by this very well-regarded TV production studio, and the producer said, "Oh, could I have a call, Jason? I heard you're looking for work." And I said, "Yeah, sure." So we had this call. I had this call with this producer. And he said, "Jason, you may not know this, but we're huge fans of MediEvil." And I was like, "Oh, wow, okay." And he explained to me. He said, MediEvil is like an evergreen concept. There's always a new generation of younger people, gamers or viewers, that love spooky horror stuff and come into MediEvil. And he also said, "You may not know this, Jason, but you have a bit of a reputation in the industry as being the spooky, quirky English guy." And he said, "We would like you to pitch to us a MediEvil-esque spooky thing, TV animated show for a younger viewership, and we'll help you put it together, and whatever, blah 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 blah, and here's how to pitch it all to us." And that made me go, "Oh wow! I never I know I'm not, I'm still a tiny little guy in a giant industry surrounded by bigger fish, but that one little sort of niche thing has opened so many doors for me, and closed a few doors probably as well, because I'm tarnished with the niche brush, the cult I think they call it, isn't it? Cult brush." But so people are still looking for something MediEvil related, and I don't even knew this, but very recently I didn't even know this, or Chris Sorrell, who's the director of MediEvil, is that Sony had sold the film rights to MediEvil, and it was in development with the guys that made the Kung Fu Panda film. And Jack Tenacious D were doing the soundtrack for the MediEvil film. And it all fell through until recently, and the film producers or director, said, "Oh, we were doing the MediEvil. We're massive fans of MediEvil. We're doing the MediEvil movie." And I was like, "Whoa!" It's just like it never goes away. It's always there. It's not Tomb Raider or it's not Resident Evil, but it's this little cult thing that just never dies. And I absolutely adore spooky horror stuff. So there's so much of my DNA in that original game. That, when you mentioned what you're most proud of, I still love that genre. And I couldn't do that TV thing because I was going through a divorce. And my solicitor said, "No, Jason, you are not taking any risk at this moment in time. You need to, knuckle down and get a proper job, and you can come back to that later." But, so that was my legal advice. But the doors are still ajar, the creaky Gothic doors are still, there's still, the little spider leg creeping through. So I would like to return to that genre. But I can't say anything about it because obviously I have ideas. So
yes, I always think Tim Burton is British.
It's like Terry Gilliam as well. I think Terry Gilliam's British, but he's actually American. I mean, he's lived here a long time.
Yes. I'm sure. I don't think I was the same person after watching Brazil. Probably nobody was.
I love Brazil.
I love Brazil. It's just the archetypal manager dude as he walks down the corridors, will follow him and goes, "Yes, 374, no, sell," and you think, I know so many people like that. I think, most certainly. And I love the pirates as well. That really blew me away. That was awesome.
Terry Gilliam is a huge influence on. I know Terry Gilliam's fallen out of favour recently, but his most of his body of work. I mean, he's had some misses, which I'm not too keen on. But his Time Bandits, Baron Munchausen, Brazil, even his recent Don Quixote, I did quite liked. But all that that pivotal stuff, I worship at the altar of early Gilliam.
One question: you've had the ability to, obviously inspired by Doncaster and whatever went on there, self-taught, self-learned, and he went on to have a really, really successful career and a legacy. How do you see people now moving into the industry? You mentioned there's lots of university students coming into the industry. How accessible is it for people to come into the games industry that are looking to start a career? And is there any advice you can give them? It's a hard question.
It's I still interview lots of artists. I see lots of CVs and portfolios. So I'm very keen on, I'm very aware of current sort of trends coming out of university. I think it's never been easier to make things because this, you can get Unity and Unreal for free and Blender and there's a million tutorials online. But I would always say that my advice to anyone is I see a lot of portfolios and CVs that all look very the same because they all come from the same courses and they all make the same characters. If I see another Game of Thrones dragon, I'll scream. Is to, I know when you're young I was the same. You look at things, you want to copy things, like you copy 2000 AD, so I get that, but my advice would be to find something different to everybody else, because just one or two things in your portfolio that's not just the same as everybody else's portfolio is going to help you. But apart from that, me and some of my industry veterans, we talk about artists wanting to do the glamour work. And what we mean by that is we see a lot of portfolios of, very super detailed figures, very high poly counts, mesh count, vert counts, but they don't show much retopologizing. And we're always looking at how you go. Okay, great. You can sculpt a great figure in ZBrush, but we want to see examples of production readiness, that you can follow a pipeline, that about optimization, that you can properly retopologize a character. And I don't mean using retopo or doing it in Maya with its kind of like hit the retopologize button. So it's not just the glamour work. It's originality, having something that's different to everybody else, showing that you can potentially work to a pipeline, and also anatomy, because a lot of students now have been told, and I've heard this, or I've been told by my fellow artists in the industry, that some university lecturers are telling artists not to bother studying anatomy. Oh. Because you can just get character creator or metahuman, and you don't need to learn anatomy, but you do, because if you're making clothing or armor or anything, or even a creature, you've got to know about the anatomy and muscle movement and those shapes in the muscles in order to fit clothes correctly. Right. So when you're skinning and weighting and doing the pipeline for all the nitty gritty stuff that you need to do when you're in a game pipeline, that grounding in anatomy and drawing skills will help you. Yes, you can get metahuman. Yes, you can get character creator, and you can just throw something into your portfolio. You don't need to necessarily draw all that stuff. But those are the biggest holes I see in portfolios of students coming out of university looking for their first job. And I know it's hard, because you do want to just work on the things that you like.
But you need the grinding as well. You have to understand the mechanics.
Yeah,
because you're competing with hundreds and hundreds of CVs.
Yeah. And again, that's what Luke was saying, that he's feeling it's not just being the best of the best, but being the best of the best of the best to get noticed.
Yeah, but definitely look at production pipelines. Definitely, don't just show the glamour work.
Yeah, I mean, I remember from my brief time in the games industry, wrestling with the artists about poly counts and them even in the job not understanding that their models had to be taken and actually deployed into the game and run in the game, and not make the whole thing grind to a halt just because they really loved the model they were making. And that's that commercial edge to the artistic.
On MediEvil, for example, one of the reasons why it has the style it has was because of the technical limitations of the time and how much polys we could throw around. So that kind of like angular, spiky German expressionism style suited the limitations of the platform at the time. And I was recently teaching in the studio last year. I was teaching some younger game designers. They'd come with this little game idea, and they were running it in Unity, and it was very limited scope in terms of the environments they had, and it was like a wannabe X. I won't mention the type of game they were making, but it was like something else. And I said, well, it's okay, but it's just like that. Just like all those other games. What's different about this? Yeah. What's the hook? And they were, and also these things are quite limited. And how are you going to pen the player in here? And how is that landscape going to be fenced off? And they couldn't answer the questions. And I said, well, what about this and that and that? And before we knew it, we created this entire amazing game idea and art style and theme. And then the limitations started becoming a plot device. And then the plot device became the game lore, and then it started shaping game mechanics. And again, a lot of younger developers, they find it really hard to look beyond what they play and see and want to make that game again, but are not looking at how you can twist that around and subvert it and try something else and turn your limitations into gameplay design.
They're not used to working with constraints and making the best of constraints.
Yeah, and turning constraints into creativity. No, it's what is it? The mother of invention and all that. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Creativity is the mother of invention.
That's it.
No,
yes.
Sorry, not creativity.
Limitations or something or other. Oh, we're terrible. You know that quote.
It's necessity is the mother of invention.
There we go.
Yes.
Great. Well, let's take a slight change of tack. To your book, Coalface, The Devil in the Smoke, available from Amazon. And that draws, as we've talked quite a bit about, the your experiences as a child during the miners' strikes, which is actually relevant as we're recording today because the UK government has announced an inquiry into one of the biggest events during the miners' strike. So it's fitting that we're doing this today. But the book, going back to the book, is beautifully drawn, but it's dark in its story. It's a bit of a contrast there. What's the main message and the learning that you want your readers to take from the story?
The scary thing is, as you were saying that, Kieran, a police van just drove past the book.
Spooky.
Wow. The message of the story, basically, some people said to me, it'd be quite good fun if you wrote a sort of like an autobiography of all your adventures in the games industry, but that sounded really boring to me. And I felt that I'd got to a point where I did want to do something like that, but talk about my Doncaster days, but come up with a fictional version of Donny in this story. Because I could see where technology was sort of heading recently with things like AI and all sorts of tools that could be misused, and unemployment was on the rise again, and the cost of living crisis, and all these things. It felt like we were almost like slipping back into the 80s again, the bad parts of the 80s. And I started out wanting to write a sort of hopeful, bright fantasy adventure story, like sort of basically Ken Loach meets Terry Gilliam via Godzilla. That was the pitch. That was the pitch when I had an agent at the time. It was Kez meets Godzilla via the video games industry. And I kind of I wanted to talk about, in a fun way for younger adults, a story about kids down on their luck, wanting to escape the world they found themselves in. And this could be any kids. It doesn't, I'm using Doncaster as a proxy for any kids who find themselves in unfortunate circumstances today, because it's basically about class. And you could be a kid in a council estate in London, or you could be a kid in 1980s Donny. And it's just about aspiration and using whatever you have, technology, to get yourself out of this situation. But technology is a double-edged sword, because just as the previous generations of parents, the Industrial Revolution, transformed the countryside, and then those workers had to fight back against their lord and masters to get working rights, and even the right to vote, even the right to own a house, all those things that people are totally unaware of. Even my friends who are the same age as me are unaware of those struggles. They think people are given rights, but everybody has to fight for their rights. Men, women, straight, gay, every black, white. Everybody had to fight for those rights. Nobody's different in that regard in terms of having a fight at some point to get where they've got now. And so that technology then gave people jobs and food on the table. But then those jobs can be taken away because that technology is then redundant and replaced with a new technology. So in the 1980s, I thought it was a great pivotal moment in the world, never mind England or Britain, where the old technologies, the old industries were dying. They were the dinosaurs. And the digital technology was coming in. So a new industrial revolution was coming to replace the old industrial revolution. And we were the product of that new industrial revolution, whereas my dad and loads of other dads like him were kind of on the scrap heap. So it was about this child navigating, or children navigating, this new world that is the world that our generation sort of shaped in many ways. And it was back bedroom programmers. You didn't go to university to make video games. There was no roadmap, there was no blueprint, there was no Unity, there was no Unreal, there was no university courses. And everybody I worked with, most of the people I worked with, never had a degree. And I remember once when we were at Sony, The Guardian wanted to write a report on the Sony Cambridge studio. I don't know why they chose us. Maybe because it was Cambridge. And they wanted to ask about university courses that people had been on. And nobody in the entire development studio at the time on MediEvil and games afterwards had been to university. Apart from the marketing guy. He was the only one. And so you had this whole industry of people who, a lot of them didn't go to university. And so Coalface was about those working class kids who found themselves in this new industrial revolution, but those same tools and technology that helped us are now beginning to be replaced by AI. And we're on the cusp of another industrial revolution. And there will be the equivalent of the Luddites back in the first industrial revolution, who will fight because the Luddites destroyed machineries because they were worried about jobs and things that hadn't been replaced. It wasn't because they did it just for the hell of it. And we may be going back to that now. So I felt like now was the perfect time to tell that quite heavy subject, but in a kind of young adult, fantastical, sort of, Gilliam-esque or whatever term you want to call it, sort of fantasy story. And that's why I wanted to do it. It was it was the most personal thing I've ever worked on, apart from a few other things I made, like Surface Tension before that. It was really saturated with me, basically. There was no compromises. There was no having to work within a team, which I love doing. I love working with a team. So it was something I wanted to tell for a very, very long time.
Sounds like a really timely read.
It does, and I'm fascinated with the fact you set it in a kind of alternate dimension of Doncaster almost. How much of Doncaster's crept in there, do you think?
Oh, a lot. A lot of Doncaster. Yeah. I mean, maybe you were the same when I was a kid, but as a kid, when you went to school from the little village you lived in, you had to walk miles across the countryside to get to the school, which I don't think many kids do nowadays. No. And even in the winter, the frozen tundra that you'd trudge across to get to school. Kids would ambush you and have a scrap and, all that kind of stuff. And when I was at school, I sometimes had some dodgy school friends and you'd bunk off school and smoke some cigarettes and... it was a bit... but nobody talked about going to university. Nobody. It was just something nobody did. It was just, you went to work in the industry, the previous industry that was collapsing, or you worked in some shops or whatever the local industry was, you were going to go there. And it was probably going to be a job for life. Yeah. So school wasn't a very aspirational place. It was just something you had to go and do. Yeah. And that was the mentality at the time. But yeah, there's a lot of Doncaster in there in terms of how I saw the look and feel at the time.
Wow, I shall look forward to reading it. That's excellent.
I had to tone down all of the language. Because an earlier draft of the script was full of colloquialisms.
Oh.
And it was quite hard to read. It was lots of going down to shops and getting a packet of fags and a lot of swearing, because that's how kids talk. And one of my friends from Cambridge, I've lost a lot of my accent, by the way, dear listener. I sound very southern now, but I still say grass and bath and castle and drugs. Bus. I have to say though, John, my girlfriend, who for her Sheffield is like Liverpool is to the Beatles, because she's a huge fan of Pulp, the band Pulp, and Jarvis Cocker.
Right, yeah.
Who is and Jarvis Cocker still has his northern accent.
Yeah.
And she is so annoyed with me that I don't have as much of my northern accent.
Does it not come back though when you go up north for a while? Do you not get?
Does a little bit, yeah. Does a bit. Well, I was trying to do an impression of the weekend of Brian Glover, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do the impression. I've lost it. I have lost
control.
It was Brian Glover in Alien, the film Alien 3.
Yeah,
Brian Glover is like the head of this prison planet.
Yeah.
And I love it because he was like this big burly Yorkshireman in charge of this, this terrible prison colony in an American movie.
He basically put the same character in Kess as it is in Alien 3. It's the same man.
That's right, yeah, exactly. Just dropped him in there.
It's absolutely incredible.
This is rumour control.
This is rumour control.
I can't do it. I feel like a castrator, John.
It'll come back. It won't forsake you. A few days, you'll be back
on track, John. Get us back on track.
Yes.
So, I will. I'll give it a go. So, there was a second write of the book after the first one didn't find a publisher. So, what drove you to rework the story and persist in the creation?
Well, the first version, if you buy the book, you can see the original, some of the original comic pages in the back of the book. There's like a big making of section at the back of the book, which shows you the first iteration of Coldface and the treatment, the story treatment. I wrote a comic series called Surface Tension. It was like an ecological folk horror sci-fi thing for Titan, and that out of the blocks was a big success. It was my first comic, and I was like, whoa, this is kind of crazy. When the first issue was released, I was contacted by a producer in LA from Dark Horse Films.
Oh.
And they'd produced the Hellboy movies and a bunch of other films, 30 Days of Night. And obviously they ran Dark Horse Comics as well. And they wanted to turn it into a TV show because they had... they were funded by Universal Studios, and so they wanted to talk to me, and they optioned it straight away, and we started developing it as a TV show. So it was like, wow. Oh my God, this everyone was really jealous, like, bloody hell, Jason, your first comic, and suddenly it's been optioned by Dark Horse Films, and it's developed as a pilot for a. This was in the cable TV days. It was just on the cusp of Netflix. It would have been 2013. And so that was really successful. And then I got a publishing agent very soon after that, and on the strength of an earlier version of Coldface and the success of Surface Tension. And the original version of Coldface was it was a bit sort of Raymond Briggsy, because I'm a massive fan of Raymond Briggs.
Who isn't?
We don't get many people like Raymond Briggs anymore who told, again, sorry if I sound like some old school dinosaur, but it was a very working class writer artist. His Father Christmas was like this grumpy working class guy. You see him on the toilet, having a dump and then grumbling as he's got to go out into the cold. It's just brilliant. I wanted to do a kind of Raymond Briggsy style fantasy story with a monster at the heart of it. And the original story was about a kid who loves computer games, but he's obsessed with dinosaurs as well. And as I was a kid as well, my dad used to bring me fossils back from the coal mine.
Oh, wow.
Find usually bits of old tree and stuff like that because basically they were petrified. They're going through petrified forests and going even beyond to get to
what coal is.
So he would bring these back for me, and there was a big array of fossilized trees and bits and pieces. And but I always wanted him to bring back, as a little kid, I always wanted to bring back like a fossilized dinosaur egg, as you do. And so in the fantasy version of the story, that does happen. And during the miners' strike, when things get really bad, and this character had an older brother, and he's been beaten by the police and comes home covered in blood and stuff. And that's when the egg hatches, and a little sort of stony dragon comes out of it and escapes, and then he finds it in the neighbour's garden. And some of the people during the coal miners' strike, they still had coal. And some people didn't have coal. Depends if you were a striker or not. If you were a striker, you didn't have much, but some people managed to get hold of coal, or people who went to work at the pits could still get coal. Anyway, so this little creature was eating the coal, and it's like, oh my God, it eats coal. And then it starts breathing a little bit of fire, so that's what makes it breathe fire, is the fact that it eats coal. And so the kid thinks, I'll put it in the pigeon shed at the bottom of the garden and keep it secret. Then he starts feeding it coal. But the more coal it eats, the bigger it gets, and the more sort of rowdy it gets and hungrier. So he has to go through the village stealing more and more coal. And he starts taking the dragon out with him, and it's getting bigger, scrambling over walls to eat the coal. And it's getting bigger and bigger. And then the police get involved because coal's been nicked, and they think it's the striking miners.
Yeah.
And then everyone gets it was light-hearted, but it had a serious message. But it was almost like a sort of Wallace and Gromity styled. You can imagine a stop motion movie in this kind of stylized northern town, and the dragon gets so big one day, and Tony, who was the main little character, the kid, who was a bit younger than the final version, his uncle's a policeman, a local policeman, because during the coal miners' strike, you had local policemen who had to work with the London Met, who came to the northern towns, and the Met were like the hards,
flying squads.
Yeah, they were there just for the money, and they were posted there, and they didn't trust the local police because they all had relations who were striking coal miners, so there was antagonism. So this little kid's uncle chases the dragon, there's quite a big dragon by this point, and chases him and sees Tony on the dragon, he's riding the dragon, and Tony doesn't know where to go, and he thinks the only safe place to go is the strike-bound colliery. So he gets inside there, and there's a villain who is this London Met officer, high-ranking officer, who's a real hard-ass and wants to kind of take down the strike, and gets wind of this thing in the colliery, and then all these different tensions are all colliding with each other, and this dragon by this point is massive, and it's in the colliery, and it's trying to dig down to the coal. And the police are all coming in, the strikers are all there, and there was this big scene which was like a big medieval battle, like Orgreave, but with this fucking giant dragon in the midst of it. And the coal miners think, it's come to save us, this thing has come in our hour of need. But in reality, there's no control in this monster, because it was a proxy for, despite the coal and the hunger in the community, but also the same thing that they're trying to protect is ultimately really bad for the environment as well. So there was that tension, there was that drama between the fact that this thing was also probably going to destroy them eventually, because environmental greenhouses are gases and smoke and coal. So there's all these different colliding tensions with this little kid in the middle of it all trying to save this little dragon, and the dragon meets its demise at the end, like the end of Valley of the Gwangi, and the kid trying to protect it, and it had this kind of sad ending. But that was the story. It was like much more of a sort of a romp, and the agent loved it, and he's going, it'll be a TV show, Jason, and I can see it as a theatre play, and but at the time nobody was interested in it. There was like I think they couldn't quite connect with the whole working class part of it, and I remember lots of people saying to me, Jason, nobody's interested in the coal miners' strike. Nobody's interested in this. And, yeah, but it's about a monster, and it's about this and that. It's not just that. And my agent would go, yeah, you need to make it more Hollywood, Jason. It needs to be more Hollywood. And I was more Wallace and Gromit, Raymond Briggs. Yeah. And it sort of fizzled out, and then I left the agent because I thought, well, I want to do my own thing. And so that version went over there and got put onto pause. And then COVID happened, and then I couldn't stop thinking about it still. And I thought, I'm just going to do a really, a totally undiluted version, a very different story, but set in the same setting, but a much sort of darker version of the same story. Yeah. So, yeah, but I kind of really wish I had illustrated and finished the other version, because you can see it in the back of the book. The artwork's beautiful. It was all colour. Yeah. It was like a proper comic. A lot of the comic people, the 2000 AD artists loved it, and they were amazed that I actually abandoned it to do another version because the amount of money I spent on it as well. So that was the original version, and I still hanker for that version. I still think there's a great film. But the irony is, after all these publishers turned it down and said nobody's interested in the coal miners' strike, there was then a TV show on BBC about the coal miners' strike, and it was a massive hit, and everybody was talking about it. Yeah. And so I was like, there you go.
Yeah. I'm not surprised that your 2000 AD contemporaries enjoyed it, because it reminded me of taking E.T., which of course is very Hollywoody, and of course the 2000 AD version of that was Skiz, where it happens in Birmingham, and it happens probably in a very deprived area, and it's an absolutely wonderful story, but it's much more real, and it touches people in a far more real way than the kind of the sanitized Hollywood version of it. And it reminds me an awful lot of that kind of realism.
Well, Pat loved Coalface, right. And he wrote a piece about it, which he allowed me to use. So I would put that in my pitch documents. What Pat wrote about it, But it didn't do it any favours because Pat is I think he's seen as a bit of a troublemaker in the industry.
We need troublemakers.
Yeah, because I know he's fallen out with 2000 AD several times. Hasn't the editors there, and and I think I love Pat, but it doesn't do himself many favours. But he's standing up for what he believes in. But you're not allowed to do that in the.
He's his own man, I guess. To encapsulate him. Yeah, but he's a giant hero of mine. Still now for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So rounding us out today, that theme there of a monster that is both an opportunity and a threat is probably something that humans have wrestled with again and again. And the current one is generative AI. We've mentioned it before, maybe threatening our jobs and livelihoods. But you're working on a project right now that is using Gen AI in a creative way to reach into history. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, it's a studio called 1956 Individuals, and they're working with museums. The most recent project we're working on is for Bletchley Park with Alan Turing, who is, strange enough, considered the father of AI. So that's very topical, isn't it? And we're working with Leeds Castle as well to realise a depiction of Queen Eleanor, because she's never really been realistically depicted. So the AI is used to drive the knowledge base of the characters. And these characters are seen on full human-sized display screens. So it's like they're standing before you in Bletchley Park or in the chapel of Leeds Castle in Kent. I thought there was Leeds Castle in Leeds, by the way. I didn't realise it was in Kent.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Talk about how disappointed I was when I realised it was in Kent. And anyway, so my job is to work with historians and do all the historical research, especially with characters like Queen Eleanor, who was a queen around sort of 1270 AD. In Leeds Castle, and work with historians to do all the research on their lives, their clothing, their physiognomy, their body structure, the materials that they would have used back in, say, the medieval times, the swatches, to sort of get physical approximations of these costumes and photograph them and video them and film them, and then build them as AAA 3D characters with some of my guys that I used to work with at Sony PlayStation who are working with me on these projects. And then once we built these characters, these very super detailed and researched characters, using no AI, by the way, for the art. All the art I do is still hand-drawn, costume designs and all the different layers. And we get the real swatches and the materials for the clothing. Put the clothing on, have a model, say, for example, dressed as Queen Eleanor or whatever character we're doing. Some of them I can't talk about because they're an NDA. And then we would build them using AAA pipelines and then animate them. Sometimes it's mocap, sometimes it's keyframed. But basically you're standing before depending on the style and the tone of the work we're doing for the museums, a life-size version of that character. So with Queen Eleanor, they tell the story of Queen Eleanor through Leeds Castle, and you go through all the different chambers and corridors where she lived, and then you're taken to an audience, almost like role-playing. You're taken to an audience with the Queen, and then she's standing there before you, and she's slightly irascible, and says, yes, next question, okay, get on with it. So the AI is used for the knowledge base inside the head of the character, which is all the research that the historians have done. And then we take that research they've done. And so then there's a camera and a microphone and a speaker array and the actual physical screen. So it can look at you, it can read your facial expression, it knows how many people are in the room, if you're tall, short, or a child, and it can communicate with you, and you can talk to it real time and ask questions about the life of a medieval queen. Specifically, we'll ask about Queen Eleanor, the food she would have eaten. So all our research even goes down to the kind of makeup a medieval queen would wear or wouldn't wear because it was church and state at the time. So we do this big deep dives into history and knowledge, working with real historians, and then models to do the clothing and get the real materials. And then we build that as we would a character, say, in a AAA game. And then all the knowledge base is driven by AI. So it gives people, like especially children, a connection with history, so they can talk to history, basically.
Yeah. It can feel like it's real. I wonder if it will confuse kids in the same way that I believe that my grandmother was confused by an animatronic dinosaur at the Natural History Museum many years ago, who asked my mum, well, it's great that they've got a real dinosaur in the museum. Not real. She was obviously very old at the time, and slightly confused just by a moving display.
I might confuse a few people. I mean, there's definitely been some Black Mirror moments, and it really does feel like going from the ZX Spectrum, starting out literally making games for that, to now having super detailed characters that can actually look at you, and you can verbally communicate real time. We can build all the super amount of detail onto these characters and have facial expressions. Going from working in an industry where it was almost basically analog in a way, cassette tapes and things like that, to all the way to where we are now, is like an amazing. And how many years is that? What, maybe 40-ish? 40 years, 40 years ish. So yeah, I mean, it's incredible.
People will feel like they're connecting with the person that they see that they're talking to.
Yeah, there's the moral questions even to ask with this. So, for example, with the Alan Turing project, we were working with Dermot Turing, who is Alan Turing's nephew. And I've had some interesting conversations with journalists from business and science backgrounds about the sort of the ethical side of that, and working with Bletchley and their tenets of what they're wanting to achieve, in that we're not recreating Alan Turing, we're recreating an avatar that talks about the team at Bletchley and that talks about Alan Turing, and so it's a conduit to all that team's work. And we stylize it in such a way that it doesn't look like a deep fake. It's obviously a sort of tonally stylized character. Okay. But yeah, I mean, I find those situations and questions fascinating, in the fact that I'm very uncomfortable with a lot of elements of AI, and I certainly wouldn't want to replace the work of writers and artists. I'm vehemently against that, or even replacing jobs. But inevitably it is going to come, just in the way that Photoshop took away traditional artists' paint jobs, or Microsoft Word took away typesetters and printers. Inevitably,
typists even,
we have taken away jobs through the technology that we all love and use, and it's not just AI. But the scary thing about AI is just the speed and the tsunami of it is going to ripple through white collar industries, especially. And ironically, the blue collar workers may be the last people standing, because it's harder to get rid of some jobs with AI, plumbers, electricians, and so forth. True. So maybe my dad was right all along, and I should have been a
maybe, or these are just cycles through time. We will maybe come to that in a later episode. But this has been a fantastic conversation. We've touched on many tensions and juxtapositions today. Between Doncaster now and Doncaster in the past. Monsters that are helping us or hindering us, we don't know. But it's been a fantastic conversation, a fantastic chat today. I'm really glad I've pushed through the cold that I've got to do this today. It's been great talking to you. Thanks very much, Jason.
Thank you, Kieran.
Yeah, Jason, as you probably tell from I've thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to chat to you today.
You fanboyed fully.
Absolutely. It's been a real thrill. So thank you so very much for sharing your experience with us and your time. And it's been an absolute joy. Thank you so very much.
Awesome. And when I'm in Doncaster, I'll have to look you up and we'll have a chip butty.
Sandal Park Cafe, chip chip butties are on me. Woo!
Forest chip butty. Yes.
Smashing. All right, gentlemen. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I've really enjoyed it.
So we've really enjoyed our conversation with Jason today, and we'll have more of the same to come. Looking to hear from people for whom video games are a big part of their lives in one way or another.
So let us know your thoughts on our Horoscopes podcasting Facebook page or our Instagram account.
It's great to hear from our listeners. Thanks again, Jason. It's been an honour to have your time today. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.